Go to sleep, little baby. It's nighty-night time.
Welcome to Moments with Mom. Today I have a special guest, my daughter-in-law. Sarah is married to Matthew and they have two adorable children, Daniel 4 and Margaret 2. Today Sarah's going to share some valuable information to help parents get their baby on a good sleep routine. Hi Sarah, thank you so much for doing this today.
Yeah, happy to.
What made you and Matthew decide to take this route with your kids?
Well, we were both full-time working parents. Sleep was important to us, and we knew that we wanted to value it as being important for our children as well. So with my first child, Daniel, I had 8 weeks before I had to go back to work, and I knew that I wanted him to be sleeping through the night by that 8 weeks when I had to go back to work. It was week 4, and we were having some issues. So I reached out to a friend of mine. She had 3 children, and when we went over to their house for Bible study at 7 o'clock at night, she would tell them good night. She would go tuck them in. 5 minutes later, she'd be back down and ready to enjoy the fellowship with each other. I knew that her kids had slept through the night successfully, and I reached out to her for her wisdom. With Daniel, I started around week 4. With Margaret, I started sooner. I followed the routines in the Contented Little Baby book by Gina Ford. She has a lot of principles as well as routines to use. And with my first go around, my friend pretty much told me all about it, which was really helpful because I had a 4-week-old baby. I didn't have time to read a book. And with my second, Gina Ford also has a Contented Little Baby with Toddler book. So great for parents, second-time parents or parents of multiples, to try and figure out how to live with a toddler and an infant. And so with her, I read that before being pregnant. So the first thing it goes through is a bunch of principles to use. A couple of them are whenever you lay your kids down for bed and naps, to use a dark room. We use blackout curtains, as well as I use a noise machine. So I have my handy dome here. We have one in both my kids' rooms, and we travel with them on vacations. We can't hear people in the hall. It's great. But starting early with that, it helps them associate that noise with rest time. Another principle that Gina uses in her books is feeding, not to put them to sleep, but when they wake up. So all of her bulk feedings, your baby sleeps, wakes up from a nap, you feed them, and then feed them when they wake up. So they're not feeding to fall asleep.
That's totally opposite of how I did it. That makes a lot of sense though.
Yeah.
Because then when they wake up in the middle of the night, they're used to being fed to go back to sleep, so they have a hard time doing that on their own.
Yeah, so that's one of the big principles. Another is not rocking them to sleep, but rocking them to calm. So with my children, I would cradle them and either rock in a rocker or walk around the room until I saw their eyes getting droopy and drowsy or other sleep signs. My daughter, hers was a yawn. When she yawned, she was ready to go to bed. Just whenever they start getting tired, I would lay them down at that point, and hopefully then they would be able to get themselves calm to sleep. If they still stirred, I'd maybe rub them on their back or pat them on their back or sing a song, but at that point I would leave them laid down. But what I did with my children, I would set a timer on my phone for whatever increment I was comfortable with for whatever age they were. The younger they are, the less what you're going to be comfortable with them crying. But I wanted to give them time to soothe themselves and try that first. Maybe with a 4-week-old, you start with 5 minutes. And as they get older, you might stretch that out a little bit. But I wouldn't go in there until that timer went off. And when I did, I wouldn't pick them up, but try and soothe them.
You would pick them up, or you would
not pick them up, but
okay.
I would soothe them with pat on the back, singing a song, just being in the room, something like that. and every child's different on what they need. But in my opinion, with my children, the more I went in there, the harder it was for them to fall asleep. It's like we started all right back on round one every time I went in there. So I sat on the porch for 5 minutes where I couldn't hear them crying, because what mom likes to hear their kid crying?
No one.
So more often than not, I'd come back inside and they'd be sleeping calm as a cucumber. So it is different with every kid, but the sooner you start, the easier it is. If you're trying to do this with a toddler, you're going to have a lot more hurdles than you are starting it out as an infant. Just because we build bad habits and we're used to things. And I will say from personal experience, as far as a pacifier goes, I had used one with my son, and I decided to break him of it at about 8 to 12 weeks, because maybe it was longer than that, but he kept waking up because it fell out of his mouth, but he wasn't old enough to put it back in yet. So we ran into some issues with his naps being cut short, and then he would be cranky and it would throw him off schedule. So I broke him of that, which was very difficult. That's one of those habits that are harder to break. And those days he cried a lot longer, but took about 2 days and he was back to his normal falling asleep by himself routine. As far as blankets, my daughter has a blanket that she sleeps with every day, and my son has a bear that he still totes around at 4 years old. I think they're great, add extra security for them. Obviously with a brand newborn infant, that's near to impossible, because they pretty much eat and sleep and that's it. So, starting around 2 to 4 weeks is whenever you can really start the routines.
Is there a feeding schedule?
Yes. So
Okay.
if you do follow Gina's book, there's a feeding schedule. She goes into pretty much detail about 10-minute increments and stuff like that. I was a little more liberal with how I use those schedules, but by most people's standards, I was probably still very structured and rigid on how I use those schedules. But the basics of it is eat, play, sleep. Eat, play, sleep. So you're not playing, eating, and then sleeping. So, your kid may vary on the exact schedule that they use, what times they go down, things like that. But the eat, play, sleep is what really stays the same. What we did is we picked a 12-hour increment at night that we wanted our kids to sleep. 12 hours is the recommended to start out with. So maybe 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. or 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. or 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Whatever works best for you and your life and your schedule. But choosing that 12-hour time, and that is our goal, to get our kids to sleep for 12 hours from point A to point B. So to do that, we would have a structured bedtime routine, which I think is also very important. So we chose 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So we would start bedtime at 6:30. They would get a bath every night. Sometimes it was an actual bath. Sometimes it was, let's get in the water and splash a little bit of water on yourself and go to bed. But that was kind of part of their bedtime routine, knowing that, okay,
at what
this
age?
is from week 1.
Okay.
We did this. And it cues them that this is my nighttime sleep, and help them understand that. Whatever your routine is, whether it's reading books, singing some songs, whatever that is, to keep that consistent every night. And with the goal of them being asleep by 7 o'clock. Bedtime is the only time that I would nurse my kids to sleep. Although I would, if they fell asleep while I was nursing them, I would try and wake them up a little bit and then lay them down. You obviously want to try and fill up their tank before you want them to go long periods of time to sleep, but you don't want them to use that as sleep. So
They don't want to use you as a pacifier.
yes, so I sometimes they'd fall asleep while I was nursing, and I maybe tickle them a little bit, wake them up the best I can for even a few seconds, and then lay them down in their cribs. But when you choose that 12-hour period, going as long as they can, whenever they wake up in the middle of the night, one thing I did, never change their diaper unless it's poopy. They can sleep with the wet diaper. It's not going to hurt them. They make nighttime diapers, Love's does, that hold extra amounts so they don't leak through at night. So I would use those special diapers at night. My goal is to feed them and put them back down as quickly as possible. I didn't make a lot of noise. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't, I would leave their noise machine on.
You weren't on your phone.
I wasn't on my phone. Really, it was kind of good reflective time to be up in the middle of the night with my baby. Sometimes I would pray, sometimes I would think. We really don't slow down enough, so it was kind of special time to me to have that. But my goal was to feed them and put them back down. So once your baby is sleeping 6 hours from the time you lay them down, so for us it was, we put them down at 7 o'clock at night. By the time they were going all the way till 1 o'clock in the morning, without waking up, I would start what's called a dream feed. So we would lay the kids down to bed at 7. Maybe my husband and I would clean up the house, watch a show, whatever. Maybe we were ready to go to bed around 10 or 11. And I would go in and not wake my kid up, but I would pick them up and feed them. They would stay asleep the entire time, and I would lay them back down. The goal is then that after we do that dream feed, they would make it closer to that 7 a.m. So by the time my kids were probably 4 months old, 3 to 4 months old, they were sleeping. Margaret was definitely 3 months. I would go in, feed them at 10 or 11, that dream feed, and they would sleep all the way till 7 a.m. So it kind of gets them that little extra amount of food without you having to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, which is
or you interrupt your sleep at all.
Yeah,
because
so
you haven't
really
gone to sleep.
Didn't interrupt my sleep. But as far as the dream feed goes, Matthew and I would actually fight over who got to do it because it was so sweet.
Aww.
I mean, you're just going in there and
get some
so
special
peaceful.
love.
They're so peaceful. They just eat and you lay them back down, and we would literally fight over who got to do it. You know, I need more sleep than my husband, so a lot of times I would go to bed maybe 8 or 9, and he would go do the dream feed, so I didn't have to wake up at all.
That's great.
But, you know, whatever works for you. But that was a precious and sweet time for us as well, without interrupting our sleep. Well, since we were talking about the dream feed, I did that until they were 6 months old and started solids. So for both of my kids, I did the dream feed until they had started solids for a week. And then I dropped it, and at that point they slept from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Very consistently. I could almost tell on the dot when they'd wake up, which helped me know how early I had to get up ready for work before they would be awake and ready to go. So it truly helped me with my routine. I like being structured as well, and I truly believe kids like being structured as well.
Yes.
So some of the challenges that you would face, you know, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. is kind of a long period. If you're wanting to go out with friends, it makes it a struggle. You know, we wanted them in bed at 7, so we started bedtime at 6:30. So even if we wanted to have an early dinner, like 5:30 with some of our friends, which most people would consider eating early, some people don't even eat till 7. You know, that's something we gave up for a period of time, probably the first year of our children's lives. But on the flip side, that also gives you advantages, because my kids, I put them down at 7. I would have babysitters over that would do nothing other than sit on my couch and watch TV. And while my husband and I went out to meet friends for dinner or go to their friend's house and play games or whatever it was, I didn't have to worry about them. I knew they were asleep. I knew they weren't going to wake up. My babysitters would say, "What do I do if they wake up?" And I'm like, "Call me, because something's really wrong." And I, you know, thankfully never had to have them call me, but, you know, I was that confident that they were going to stay asleep. So I would really recommend that you go out and get a copy of Gina Ford's book, The Contented Little Baby, or The Contented Little Baby with Toddler if you have other little ones around the house. We talked a lot about ideal situation in this video, and there's so many topics you can go on with your children and getting them on a good feeding, eating, sleep routine. But she also goes through a lot of the common issues and problems and walks through some of those, some different ideas of ways to work through them, such as babies that have trouble burping or have colic or reflux, difficult feeders, if you have a low milk supply, if they have early morning waking or excessive night waking. She runs through all those topics and kind of can gear toward what issues you're having versus just the ideal structure there. So definitely recommend checking out the book, and support as well. It's really nice if you can find someone else that's going through this with you. I had a good friend that was going through it as well, that understands the schedule and understands if you have to leave early or something like that, but also someone to bounce ideas off of. My friend who got me started on this program, I would text her almost every other morning. She'd be like, "How did you do last night?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I woke up at 2 and then slept till 7," or whatever it was. And she was always excited to hear and give me advice. And so reach out to your fellow moms. Fellowship and that is huge as well.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for all your information. I'm sure you're going to be a great help to all these new moms and dads out there. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them down below, and we'll do our best to get to them and answer them as well as we can. I hope you liked this vlog, and if you did, would you please hit the button down below. Until my next Moments with Mom, enjoy your family, have fun, and always give thanks in all things.